Hey, have you been following the recent news about the Philippines?
Not really. What's been happening?
There's been a lot of talk about democracy there. Some people are worried that it's under threat.
That's concerning. What's going on?
Well, there have been some controversial policies from the government that some people think are undermining the rule of law. Plus, there are concerns about freedom of the press and the freedom of speech.
Yeah, I've heard that the Philippines has had some issues with that in the past.
Definitely. But there are also a lot of people fighting to protect democracy and keep the government accountable. It's an important conversation to be having for sure.
Well, I've heard you guys are talking about democracy. Why not use this YouTube video for that purpose instead? If so, then let's get started.
This program is rated PG and may contain mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
The democracy and progress of the Philippines will be explored by Josh, Lester, and Cedric. The topics will be divided into Philippines under Japanese occupation, after World War II, under President Ferdinand Marcos regime, People Power Revolution, and the conclusion. Yes, it's World War II. The Philippines is under Japanese occupation. They entered our country just like what the Spaniards and Americans did to us before. But what did they do? Did the Japanese only come to our archipelago? No. They basically invaded us and they tried to control us. They imprisoned and oppressed many Filipinos, but not these guys. The Hukbalahap or the Hukbong Bayan laban sa Hapon. They fought the Japanese night and day from island to island in the Philippines for the Filipinos' freedom. They wanted the Japanese out of their country because of what atrocities they have committed. When the Imperial Japanese realized that they basically needed more means to control all of the Philippines, they made a puppet government, which changed many of our political designations and perspectives. In terms of economy, however, it was bad, super bad. Many Filipinos are starving to death. Many have no jobs and occupation at all. The alternative currency that the Japanese instated to the Filipinos was such a joke. People started calling them Mickey Mouse money, because they are so worthless that you cannot buy anything with it. In Japanese occupation, Filipinos are forced to act against their will. There is a lack of freedom and people cannot enact any democratic means. The Filipinos have been robbed of their freedom of speech. There's basically no more democracy present at this period because we are kind of slaves to Japanese occupants. Our progress in terms of politics was tampered with by the Japanese. The economy was crippling because of the inflation at that time. And our infrastructures, they are all destroyed. All thanks to war brought to us by the Japanese. You just wonder, what happens after World War II? What happens after it all ends? The war is finished. The Japanese have been swept back away to their mainland by the Americans. But the destruction still remains in the Philippines. Reparations for the Philippine nation are ongoing to rebuild the once flourishing country. Independence has now been given to us by the Americans, and the voices of the Filipinos can now be heard. Democracy has been restored for the Filipinos. People are able to vote freely once again, without any foreign-sponsored governmental party. Only those who were suspected of collaborating with the Japanese has not been able to vote in the first post-war elections. We can refer to the data on the screen about the Democracy Index of the Philippines. It is shown here that there was a great recession in democracy when the Japanese invaded the Philippines. We can also see that the democracy was restored in the Philippine post-war period. This is likely because Filipinos are no longer bound to any foreign oppressors. But we can also see the fall in the authoritarian period as well as the rise in post and Tsar-revolution, but those are stories for later topics. In the context of Philippine economy, the United States has lent reparation funds to the Philippine nation. There are also some great economical growth in the Philippines despite the high rise in inflation just after the war has ended. There are many political outbursts as Hukbalahap tries to issue a rebellion against the Philippine government. They did many atrocities such as the assassination of Aurora Quezon. The Filipinos will never forget that. That is all for the democracy and progress in the Philippines in post-war period. We will now proceed to the former President Marcos's regime.
Context of democracy and country's progression, Ferdinand Marcos, elected as the country's 10th president in 1965, has yet to become the central figure in Philippine politics for over 2 decades, playing a significant role in shaping the Philippine history. During his early part of administration, major reforms in government organization, public infrastructure, as well as social and economic development were implemented, improving the overall well-being of the country and its citizens. However, during the final years of Marcos' regime, the economy experienced negative growth due to the factors such as heavy reliance on foreign loans, corruption among government officials, and capital flight. Not only causing economic hardship for the country and its citizens, but also made the country to be known as the sick man of Asia, which describes a country undergoing economic or political strife, much like how the pandemic allowed some of this old habit of corruption to return. Let's talk about something interesting. Mentioning his name, the first thing that comes to mind for many Filipinos is martial law, an event that happened long ago but still leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And while some Filipinos claim that martial law is a time of order and stability, others may view it as a dark period of repression and abuse. During his rule, Marcos espoused an ideology of constitutional authoritarianism, which he claimed was necessary to bring about stability and progress to the country. However, his action undermined democratic institutions and processes and led to widespread suffering and hardship for the Filipino people. Despite these challenges, Marcos was able to maintain his grip on power through a combination of repression and manipulation. Not until the opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. was assassinated upon his return to the Philippines from exile, leading to widespread protests and calls for Marcos's ouster. In the year of 1986, a snap presidential election was held, but was widely regarded as a fraudulent. This led to the People Power Revolution, also known as the EDSA Revolution or the February Revolution, which is a sustained campaign of civil resistance against regime violence and electoral fraud that ousted Ferdinand Marcos, who has been in power for over 2 decades. After Ferdinand Marcos stepped down from his position, Corazon Aquino became president and began the process of restoring democratic institutions and processes which set the Philippines on the path of democracy. However, despite 30 years of democratic politics following the People Power Revolution in 1986, the political system of the Philippines remained as highly defective democracy, meaning there are regular and strongly contested elections and parties are free to organize and campaign for votes. And to summarize, Marcos' rule was marked by widespread corruption, human rights abuses, and suppression of political oppositions. The country experienced debt crisis, extreme poverty, and severe underemployment by the end of his dictatorial era. Martial law lasted for many years in the Philippines and was a time of authoritarian rule. It was not until the People Power Revolution in 1986 that Marcos was forced to flee the country and democracy was restored.
The Philippines went through significant changes in its political and economic landscape during the post-World War II era. After gaining independence from the United States in 1946, the country shifted from a colonial past towards democracy and progress. The Philippines is a democratic country with a presidential system of government. The president is both the head of the state and the head of government. You can think of him as a mafia boss or a level 999 sultan, which ruled the whole nation as his political territory. The country has a bicameral legislature, which is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Members of the legislature are elected by the people through a democratic process. The Philippines has a multi-party system, which means that there are various political parties that participate in elections to form the government. Citizens of the Philippines have the right to vote and participate in the democratic process. which allows them to choose their leaders and express their opinions. However, the Philippines faced various challenges in the post-World War II era, such as political instability, widespread corruption, and poverty in the face of democracy. The country also faced significant social issues, including a lack of access to education and healthcare, and also a large wealth gap between the wealthy and the poor. In recent years, the country has faced some challenges in terms of corruption and human rights abuses. But democratic institutions such as the Commission on Elections and the Commission on Human Rights continue to work towards ensuring free and fair elections, as well as protecting the rights of every citizens. Despite these challenges, the Philippines continued to progress and develop throughout the post-World War II era. The country's democracy continued to mature, with several peaceful transfers of power taking place through elections, and the economy continued to grow as the country's infrastructure and industries developed. In summary, the post-World War II era marked a significant period of change and progress for the Philippines, with the establishment of democracy and the development of the country's economy. Though challenges remained, the country continued to develop and prosper throughout this era.